guys, sorry it's been so long since I've uploaded. I have a whole new series coming your way, and this time round, instead of doing it about missing persons in Ireland, I'm going to be covering cases of female murderers in Ireland. Ireland has a few infamous female murderers in the last decade or so, and I just wanted to cover a few of their stories. And the first story that I'm going to cover is about Catherine Nevin. So in the early hours of a wintry March morning, the Wicklow Gardaí received a phone call from a security company. Following protocol, a security clerk had notified the Gardaí of an alarm that was triggered in a local pub called the Jack White's Inn. When detectives Martin McAndrews and Paul Kaminsky arrived at the scene, they saw that the pub door was open and a woman behind it slumped over on the floor with her hands tied tightly behind her back. It was one of the pub owners, Mrs. Catherine Nevin. She was dressed in just a purple silky skirt and white underwear. Her first words to the Gardaí were, "He came into the bedroom. He had a knife. He had a knife and a hood over his head." Gardaí searched the downstairs of the pub and discovered the lifeless body of Mr. Nevin, Catherine's husband and co-owner of Jack White's Inn. He'd been shot in the heart by a single round of a shotgun fired at close range, his reading glasses still on and pen still in his hand. At first glance, the crime scene told of a robbery gone wrong. The two detectives lifted Catherine onto a nearby sofa. As she lay there, she whispered, "Where's Tom? Where's my husband?" Trying to piece together what had happened, detectives asked her what she could remember. Catherine had told them how she had gone to bed to read with a glass of whiskey and then fell asleep. She then told Gardaí that she was woken up by a man wearing a balaclava and holding a pillow against her face and shouting at her for money. She was tied up to a chair, but later managed to free herself to raise the alarm. Jewellery was scattered all around her room and even down the stairs of the pub. Drawers were pulled out and on the floor. 2 phones were left off the hook, and a portable TV was left in the hallway, as if the robbers had intended on bringing it with them, but then got distracted and had to leave it behind. The only thing that was visibly stolen was the couple's car and 13,000 Irish pound in cash. See, this happened 2 days after St. Patrick's Day, which is a national holiday here in Ireland, and it's also one of the busiest weekends for publicans. And Tom Nevin had missed the bank the previous business day to lodge the takings from St. Patrick's Day weekend. So all this cash was left in the safe, which was in the pub. So somebody either had to know that Tom had missed the bank, or somebody just got very lucky on the night. So Catherine told of how she had shut the pub a little early that night and sent everyone home so that Tom could count the takings from that day. She retired to her bedroom, leaving Tom in the kitchen to do the accounts on his own. Catherine seemed shocked and mourned for her husband, which made it very difficult for Gardaí to get the whole picture of what happened that night. Some of the things that Catherine was saying didn't make sense, and the crime scene didn't quite match up with the typical characteristics of a robbery. For example, Catherine used a panic button to alert the Gardaí, and not her mobile phone that was in her bedroom at the time. Her bedroom was in a state of disorder, but it didn't appear to be systematically searched, as though someone was looking for something. And jewellery was scattered around, but none was taken. A Gardaí fingerprints expert also noted that the drawers had appeared to be lifted from the sides and placed on the floor, rather than pulled out and thrown. And none of the windows or doors of the pub had any signs of forced entry. At first, Catherine refused to give a full statement to the Gardaí, saying that she didn't trust the local Garda station. However, she later gave a statement on the advice of her solicitor. Catherine was also disruptive and agitated when the fingerprints expert examined her home, and a few loose ends at the scene of the murder ensured detectives became dubious of Nevin's story, and eventually it would lead to her downfall. So only Catherine's fingerprints were found on the jewellery box, and no jewellery was actually taken. Days after the incident, Catherine had told her sister-in-law that her ankles had been tied together and pulled tightly towards her back and bound to her wrists with her own nylons, but no such ties were ever found. On the day of Tom's funeral, Catherine had told then Assistant Garda Commissioner Mr. Jim McHugh, that the smell of incense at the ceremony reminded her of gun smoke that she had smelled in the kitchen on the morning of Tom's murder. But officers realized instantly that it would have been impossible for Catherine to smell the discharge from the gunshot unless she had been in the kitchen shortly after Tom was murdered. This conflicted with what she had put in her statement when she said that she had not gone near the kitchen during the raid. And so in June of that year, Gardaí felt that they had enough evidence to arrest Catherine. And the events that took place on the 19th of March in 1996 would unearth a truth that would shock and entice an entire nation.
He was arrested the following year and taken to the Bridewell Garda station. It was a trial that attracted massive media attention with many twists and turns. Catherine Nevin became known as the Black Widow during one of the longest murder trials in Irish history, her attire making daily headlines until the court banned all further reporting on her appearance or demeanour.
Catherine Nevin's first trial would be aborted after only 14 days because the court crier, who is the judge's assistant, would claim that the walls of the jury's room were so thin that you could hear the case being discussed. A second trial was mounted. This too had to be stopped after a jury member fell ill. Then the third trial had to be adjourned because Catherine herself declared that she was unwell, although she was faking it, and the trial resumed 6 days later. The notes in the trial showed nearly 100 contradictions in the evidence that Catherine gave during the 4 days that she was on the stand. The jury heard from over 170 witnesses, including staff, friends and ex-lovers of Mrs. Nevin. Some staff members from Jack White's Inn recalled of how Mrs. Nevin had made their lives misery. Kathleen Stafford was a single mother who worked part-time for the Nevins. She did the cleaning and other menial jobs. Mrs. Nevin laid down rules that were so strict they verged on the inhumane. According to Mrs. Nevin, nothing that Kathleen done was ever good enough. Mrs. Nevin would demand that Kathleen clean again a room or rooms that she had already done. Kathleen was asked to come in early for every shift, even though it wasn't necessary. But the last straw came when Kathleen refused to work full-time. Mrs. Nevin actually called the social welfare office to inform them that Kathleen refused full-time work, and so she should not be entitled to any government financial help. At the other end of the scale was one Tom Kennedy. He was a Garda inspector for the Arklow Garda station. He possessed the most senior rank in the area, and it was probably this that attracted Catherine most to him. Although he would later deny it in court, there were several witnesses swore that they had become intimate in or around 1991. Through Tom, Catherine had also met Judge Donica, who also denied having a sexual relationship with Catherine, despite evidence given by 2 former employees that proved that not only was the judge intimate with Catherine, but he also had his own set of keys to the pub. In fact, Tom Nevin and Catherine Nevin no longer lived as husband and wife as early as 1986. She had asked for a divorce many times, but because of Tom's religious family and the fact that he had already been divorced once before, he refused to put his family through any more disappointment by divorcing another woman. And so Catherine wanted her husband gone so badly that between 1989 and 1991, she made no fewer than 18 requests to have her husband murdered. With Tom gone, Catherine would see to inherit her half of the pub, which in total was worth 670,000 Irish pound. She would also inherit their 2 Dublin properties, which at the time were worth around 1 million Irish pound, an insurance policy which would pay out 78,000 Irish pound, and also 197,000 pound in cash. So back to the trial. The prosecution would hear from 3 men who gave detailed statements on how Catherine had tried to hire them to kill her husband. The first man was a small-time criminal whom she had met in 1984, and they had a 3-year-long affair. He even worked at Jack White's Inn, and for the purpose of this video we are going to call him A. One day, while Catherine was in St. Vincent's Hospital recovering from cosmetic surgery, although she had told everyone that it was a supposed heart attack, she asked this A to come over and visit her. A was worried for Catherine, and so of course went into the hospital and visited her. There she would ask him an unusual request. Catherine asked him to kill her husband. "There's £20,000 in it for you," she said. "Get rid of Tom and you and I can get back together. What do you say?" At first, A was taken aback. "I say go fuck yourself." But she had it all worked out. He was to hit Tom on his way to the bank with the takings from the inn, or wait for him outside their home. But A wasn't buying into it and told her no. And even after she approached him again a few weeks later with a similar proposition, he still declined. Next on stand was gentleman number 2, who, for the purpose of this video, we will call B. He was a businessman and would also host a political advice centre in the back of his shop. Catherine would offer the inn to B for his Republican meetings and also fundraising events. I suppose in a way she thought this would earn her political kudos. One day, Catherine unexpectedly turned up at this gentleman's shop. She had a proposition for him. "I want you to get the IRA to shoot Tom," she said, "and make it look like a robbery." At first, B thought she was joking, but she wasn't. She returned to his shop a few weeks later with a plan. It was to be done on a bank holiday weekend, when the takings from the inn would exceed 25,000 Irish pound in cash. Tom would be taking the cash to his bank in Dublin. All the IRA had to do was waylay him, kill him, and then take the money. But B declined and said, no way. She hounded him for 18 months. She even went as far as to show up at his shop with bandages around her hands and wrists and what looked like to be 2 black eyes. She had accused Tom of beating her up and asked if this would make him reconsider. As a matter of fact, the bruising and bandages were for more cosmetic surgery, and luckily B still refused. The last person on trial that Catherine had approached to kill her husband is gentleman number 3, or C. He was a quiet man and an active member of the IRA. He worked for B in his shop, and B actually introduced him to Catherine. One day, Catherine asked C if he would go for a drive with her. She said she had a proposition for him. He agreed, and then when they got to Phoenix Park, she pulled over and turned off the engine. "Can you murder my husband?" she had asked. C was shocked. His first thought, much like the others, was that this was a wind-up, but it wasn't. She offered him the £25,000 and told him the plan. And C responded, almost humouring her. "Nobody would do it for that kind of money," he said. So Catherine left him for a couple of weeks in the hopes that he might change his mind. She approached him again and again, but after several visits and no real answer from C, she respectfully moved on. So on Monday, the 18th of March in 1996, the day before Tom Nevin's murder, a stranger walks into Jack White's inn and orders a coffee. This was around 6 p.m. It was noted because he had made a whispered phone call and had never actually been seen leaving the pub. There was the customary Monday night disco in Arklow, and all the staff would normally get a minibus from Jack White's inn and then get the bus back to the pub and spend the night back at the inn. But not this time. Catherine had ordered the staff to clear the tables by 10 p.m. and draw all the curtains in the restaurant. No one was allowed to come back after the disco, and this did raise suspicion by the staff. The minibus departed a little after midnight. No one remained except for Catherine and her husband, Tom. She went to bed, leaving him alone in the kitchen, where he pulled himself a pint of Guinness and sat down at the stool in the kitchen to go over his finances from the previous bank holiday weekend. It is believed that the murderer was already on the premises. On April 11th, 2000, a jury found Catherine Nevin guilty on all 4 counts of murder and soliciting to murder. The judge told her that she had assassinated her husband twice, once when she murdered him, and again when she destroyed his character in court. Catherine was sentenced to life in prison. Catherine had appealed her case in 2003 and again in 2010, with no success. In 2016, Catherine was diagnosed with a brain tumour at the age of 65 and was given only months to live. She received compassionate leave in 2017 after serving 17 years in jail, and died on the 19th of February in 2018. So we don't know who Catherine successfully contracted to kill her husband, or maybe she'd done it herself. But if you guys want to check out the case for yourselves, then I highly recommend that you do. There's loads of information about this case out there, and more than I have even included in this video. But I wanted to just give you guys a brief overview of the details of this tragic story. Let me know down below if there's any other cases you'd like for me to cover, and I will definitely add them to my list. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this. Take care, stay safe, bye!